Hello everyone and welcome back to our YouTube series, The Big Analytics Query. Today we are joined again by Richard Cashmore. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining. And today we are talking about Azure Data Platforms and the challenges of managing them in their various ways and forms. So Richard, why don't you start by introducing yourself again for those who might not know you?
Yeah, so I'm the Infrastructure and Security Solutions lead. So I work in the pre-sales and solutioning team within Simpsons. I also look after sort of the managed services from a pre-sales perspective as well.
When we say Azure Data Platform, what do we mean? First, let's start very basic.
So the analytical workloads in Azure, obviously things like Synapse, Databricks, Fabric.
Everything like that. And then, of course, managing that could be such a big job, which is what we're talking about here today. Why don't we talk about some of the challenges that can happen with managing those?
Yeah, I mean, data platforms can be, and not in every case, but a lot of the time they're quite complex systems, a lot of moving parts. And I think they obviously require quite specialist skills to be able to manage and develop. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that they're very dynamic. Probably more so than most Azure workloads. You've got things like changing data sources, or there might be changes in the data structures, emerging technologies as well. Things are constantly changing within the Microsoft and the Azure ecosystem. So things like AI, machine learning, new emerging technologies are constantly being developed.
And I guess with that constant moving parts and development, whilst also maintaining, it's bound that something unfortunately will go wrong at some point with so much complexity in there. What can happen to a system when things start to struggle?
Well, I mean, you've got things like failed pipelines, poor performance of the pipeline, if there's long-running jobs.
What about the impact on the organization? So it could be something as simple as a failed pipeline or just a linked service not working or anything, but what can be the knock-on effect of even a small error?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how critical what that data platform is used for. I mean, a poorly managed system eventually could lead to things like system down, the system being down, or maybe even cost overruns. So if it's not being maintained properly, unmanaged resources, or it hasn't been sized properly, costs can go through the roof.
So I guess it's important to get ahead of those problems before they become. So how would you recommend is a good way to manage that Azure Data Platform?
So I think first of all, it's understanding like the criticality and the actual the use of that data platform and the teams that rely on that data insights. I think without truly understanding that, you could either you could overmanage it or you could undermanage it.
Yeah.
So I think understanding first that like how important that platform is to your business, and then structuring how you manage it from that. I mean, we personally look at kind of four main areas being availability, performance, security, and cost optimization. From an availability perspective, making sure that system's always available. It's got, redundancy, it's backup. So if it does go down, you've got that. From a performance perspective, that it's performing as expected, as required. Again, this really depends on organizational needs, like to what is good in these areas. What might be acceptable for one organization in terms of performance and availability might not be acceptable for another. From a security perspective, that it is, again, secure to the right level, because, again, security is something that's subjective. Like what is secure to one business is not secure to another business. And depending on how it's used, for an example, if you've got a data platform that's let's say for a hospital, a healthcare provider, that patient safety and care is dependent on that, then that's got a slightly different risk profile to an organization that has a data platform for website analytics or something like that. So first understanding like what is important, then creating your threshold based on that.
And I guess that is a really bespoke item between your company and what your organization does, as well as the reliance on that Azure Data Platform and what outputs that brings. So what about going back to a more kind of general term? How would you describe a healthy Azure Data Platform? What are the things that you want to get from it?
Well, I guess it kind of goes back to what I was saying there, where you've got it's highly available, it's performs as expected, it's secured to the right level, and it's got minimal to no overspend. So it's been fully cost optimized.
And so how then can you go about making sure that those things are put in place, that you've got those 4 categories?
Well, I mean, visibility is key in this. I mean, you can't manage something that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So use of monitoring systems for things like to make sure that pipelines have run or they've run to the expected performance. Jobs aren't taking too long.
And I guess within those monitoring systems, that could be just from Azure Monitor, someone logging in and checking it within Synapse, or email alerts and whatever is relevant to them.
Yeah, again, like what the depending on how much monitoring and how you monitor is depending on how critical that system is to you. For how we do it, in terms of our monitoring, we use things like Azure Monitor and we have a certain alert framework that we have to monitor certain KPIs and metrics that we deem as important when managing a data platform. So yeah, I'd say monitoring is a really key part, and obviously the maintenance, security maintenance on top of that, doing like access reviews, making sure that people that have access still need access, have the right level of access, optimize the pipelines for performance, reviewing things like data volumes to make sure that what you have can handle what's going through, and then optimizing resources for cost.
Yeah. And I guess within those optimization pieces, you've got a balance within the organization of making that maintenance element, but also keeping the developmental improvement. And that must be a challenge on resourcing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key challenges that we see from our customers is that they don't have the right levels of resourcing. They might have the right expertise, but they don't have the right resources to actually jump on an issue, within an hour and just jump straight onto resolving it. Often, what tends to happen, if they do jump on it, they may kind of patch it and sort it.
Make sure the report is working again and the person's got their results, but ultimately not fixing a problem, so it could just happen again.
Absolutely, and I think what will tend to happen, they'll be fixing the same problem over a year, and because it's ad hoc, they're not looking at the big picture and saying we're having this issue at every single time. What's the underlying problem to this issue? And they're not doing that sort of problem management, which obviously typically you'd get from a managed service or a proper managed service team.
And I guess with that person, if they're trying to do developmental work or their own work and kind of monitor it the side, there's not kind of that awareness of what would happen, or if they go on holiday and something, there's could be various reasons why things don't get properly resolved at no fault of their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thinking of all these different parts and things that need to be solved and juggled together, how would you recommend organizations put in good practices to help manage their Azure data framework?
So when we are assessing, when we built a data platform for an organization, and we were about to hand it over, one of the things that I do when I start speaking to the customers is try and understand kind of the 3 main things, like I said earlier, around what's the criticality of this data platform, who's going to be reliant on it, so we can establish like what is the right level of support required. Also ask questions around expertise in-house expertise. Will they be able to handle some of the issues that they are likely to come across when they've got their data platform operating, and their resource levels. So those are 3 things I try to understand. And not just that, I go a little bit further. I might say, well, do you have the expertise to even set up the monitoring systems in place? Do you have a framework? Do you know what the KPIs and metrics you need to alert on to make sure you're tracking the health and security of your data platform? So those are kind of the 3 things I try. 4 things I try and understand when scoping a managed service, like all the requirement for it.
I guess when you're talking about the critical nature of some of the issues, some things would need to be resolved within 15 minutes and then looked at and solved properly, or within an hour, whereas other things are, we're aware of this fault, let's properly fix this within a week or so, and it really just depends on that situation. But you've got to be aware of how reliant your solution is on certain elements of the framework. Is that?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think something that I've also seen before is where some organizations may have a managed service partner managing their Azure, and their hope is that partner will be able to manage the data platform as well.
Yeah.
And we've seen this a few times where a lot of those guys are fantastic Azure engineers, but they don't have that. They're not data engineers.
Yeah.
They won't understand that, and sometimes they'll prioritize and triage alerts incorrectly because they don't have that context. So, they'll look. They may treat certain alerts differently. So, a report failure, right, high priority, but let's say a value's changed in a report. Actually, that could be just as bad.
Yeah.
As the report failure.
They're getting the wrong data.
Yeah.
That's almost could be worse than having no data.
Exactly. But it'll be triaged in a certain way because they don't have that context of why that's bad. So this is why I think having that context of and that background experience of data platforms, managing data platforms is so important.
And so that's sort of how they're using the data. It's more than the platform itself. It's the end product and the purpose of the platform.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we mentioned earlier about all the different tools within the Azure suite that there are. I guess with everything changing so much as it is at the moment, an introduction of Fabric amongst many other tools, you really do have to be an expert on a wide range of areas in order to appropriately manage everything from source system all the way to those reports.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, I was looking at some of the different technologies that we use internally just to manage the data platform, and it's all its components. And there's quite a bit, from making sure, like Azure Monitor being our sort of main one. Obviously, if you're an organization that has to manage multiple data platforms, there are multiple tenants, you're gonna have to some way to federate that single view. So that could be like Azure Lighthouse. For Fabric, there's the metrics capacity, metrics capacity app, and the monitoring hub within Fabric for that sort of workspace level monitoring. There's lots of technologies to try and to allow you to have that insight and that sort of visibility.
And I guess there's also the security that we mentioned earlier, and with audits and ISOs and everything else that needs to be done, that's another step that needs to be constantly reviewed with a different skill set entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Things like Sentinel potentially. If again, it really depends on your specific security level that you require, because it's quite easy to go overkill. But there is, I would say, a bare minimum that you should have. But yeah, things like Sentinel, Defender for Cloud, these are great security tools.
And so what does Simpsons offer in the way of managed services in helping customers and clients out?
Yeah, so our approach is we started off with having managing data platforms, only managing data platforms. But we started to realize that often when we'd be deploying a data platform in an Azure environment, and it's pretty much greenfield in there. It was often their first real step into Azure. So we started to realize that we should really offer something a bit further than that, and actually start look at managing their Azure environment as well if they don't have it.
So this is after Simpsons have made the whole system for them and then hand it over, but actually there's not the understanding of how to keep it going.
Yeah, so not even just from the data workload side, but the actual infrastructure and right across their environment. And obviously, when we're managing a data platform, it's really useful to have someone that or have some level of control, or deal with someone that has some level of control over their tenant. So if they don't have that, that's where we basically created the Azure Cloud Managed Service to kind of fill those gaps where we see it, which also then led on to our Azure Application Managed Service. So actually, we do have the skills in house for application integration. So we stood up an application managed service too. So we can provide that end-to-end managed service right from your data workload applications and your actual infrastructure. And then we have kind of three different levels, and we kind of map to the common situations we see with customers, where it could be they might have a small data platform, but it's very critical to them, and they don't have the skills in house or the resource in house to deal with issues like we were saying. So a managed service, this is where a more proactive managed service like our premium tier or our enterprise tier might be. Really premium tier for let's say small data platform.
For the proactive.
Yeah, so they get that.
Critical.
Yeah, so they get that proactive SLA-based monitoring and response and resolution. But there might be a customer where, let's say, it's a not very critical data platform. They don't really have much skills in house, really. But because it's not that critical to them, they're fine with that sort of like break fix support. So they may just ask for our sort of our essentials tier, where it's like I said, just break fix.
When it's broken, you'll fix it. And if it's not broke, don't need to fix it.
Exactly. It's not particularly important to them. So I would never, if it wasn't that important to them, and there was no need for like real time data streams or anything like that, then I would say, yeah, essentials is probably enough. So it really depends on those three factors of criticality, expertise, and resource is kind of how I kind of estimate which is right for them. Or it could be like, say, a very complex, large data platform, and then we would say, because it's of this size, this kind of falls into enterprise tier, which we would then essentially tick box kind of the activities that we feel that or that you feel that you need and we feel that you need. So that could be bespoke SLAs and different type of managed service activity. So it's kind of like a not pick and mix, like a select, like you
select, but it's making sure that the solution works for them in a way that's relevant rather than a one size fits.
Yeah, it's that the enterprise is customized as a customized service for them.
So it can range all the way from being proactive, fully managing the service for someone who doesn't have the skills, all the way to kind of almost just being that extra resource for when too many people are too busy or they go on holiday or anything, just having that extra, oh, I need some help here. Can you step in?
Yes, absolutely.
And when thinking about this, whether it's with Simpsons or otherwise, what final tips would you recommend to organizations when they come to managing this service? I feel like we've spoken about it already, but what are those tools that you absolutely need to have?
So at the very least, you need to make sure you have the right expertise in-house. So first understand what are the types of issues that you're going to potentially face, what are the maintenance tasks that you're going to have to do. So then you can assess what skills you should have in-house to be able to handle that. Then have an honest look at your resource levels. Is it likely that your team will be able to jump on an issue, within an hour and drop all other work and work on resolving those issues? Do you have the right tools in place to do that? Do you have Azure Monitor set up? Or can you set it up? Do you know the alerts, the KPIs, the metrics that you should be monitoring for? And I guess what we've been saying throughout the whole of this is, do you truly understand the criticality and the impact of your data platform, so you can properly create the thresholds and the requirements for that support that you want to kind of create internally. I think those are the key.
And I guess that last point is almost the most important, of understanding why, because we know that the end reporting and the solutions can be so relied upon, but often actually the maintenance and the fixing of it can be a sort of last ditch effort and solution, and making sure that team just keeps its head above water. But actually, we're suggesting having those critical conversations and actually looking at it honestly and saying, is there the resource of when things do go wrong, or is it just floating along at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Going from instead of a reactive approach to managing your data back to a proactive approach is where you want to be, where you can start looking at the alerts over a period of time and recognize trends that could potentially degrade the performance of your platform or lead to downtime or security risks. So being able to look at those things and recognize that and deal with it before it becomes a problem is kind of the where you kind of want to be.
So almost as simple as, rather than fixing it, just improving solutions. If you've got a pipeline that's slowly increasing by 5 minutes every day, eventually it's going to break. But if you can spot it before it breaks, you can do a lot more
Absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Richard, for joining us, and thank you for watching. If you've got any questions about this, please do leave them in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.